All right. Hello, we are live here. I hope the lighting is okay. Maybe I need to turn on another light. Hold on. Let me just try that real fast. Nope. Okay. So here we are on Friday evening. This is the live review for my anthropology classes heading into the final exam. This week, the only material you were responsible for was religion, magic, and superstition. And so there were 3 videos associated with that. And I'm sorry, my dog just opened my door. Let me go ahead and close it again. All right. He's very clever and crafty. Yeah, so of course, I just closed down the windows that I wanted to have open. We're talking about religion, magic, and superstition. And then I also want to go over just some stuff from Unit 3. Specifically today, I want to focus on the cultivation lecture. So let me pull this stuff up and then, okay. Got this here. Good. All right, so I want to start tonight because I think that a couple people are going to be coming, after this live review and seeing what we're talking about. So I want to just talk a little bit about this end of the semester. And again, this is for my students. This review session is aimed for my students. If you are not one of my students, you're welcome to be here, but this is specifically targeted to the people who are in my class. So if you are a student of mine, we're recording this on Friday evening. Your last exam of the semester will go online tomorrow morning, Saturday, the 16th of May. You have to submit that exam on Saturday, the 23rd of May. So that means you have a full week in which to choose the time that you want to take the last exam. You can pick any time over the next week. So if you're like, you know what, I've been keeping up all semester, I feel really good about it, I just want to get it over with so I can be done with it, then take it whenever you want, right? Starting tomorrow morning. If, however, you're like, I know that I have a bunch of classes that I have to deal with, I have a bunch of finals, I've got final papers, then you can wait until the end of the week. That's totally fine. But I need everyone to submit this last exam sometime in the next week up until the 23rd. The 23rd is the absolute last date that I can take any work for credit. And I really, that is a solid date, because depending on which class of mine you're in, the final exam date for us is either Tuesday the 19th or Wednesday the 20th. So I'm already pushing the exam deadline to the 23rd to hopefully give you a little bit more time and a little bit more flexibility. But I can't go beyond that because I have to turn in grades to CUNY first on the 27th. And I need those, it ends up being 3 days, right? 3 or 4 days, the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. I need those days to grade exams, to calculate scores, and then I'm going to email everyone with their final grades in the class before I submit them to CUNY first. So everyone will know what their grade is before I submit it to CUNY first. But that's why I have to have everything by the 23rd at the latest. A lot of you will have received emails from me already, and those of you who haven't received emails from me, either it's because you've just been doing a really good job keeping up with everything, and so it's like you're going to be getting an email tomorrow, or the other reason, if you haven't gotten an email, not checking the email address that's in Blackboard for you. So check that email address or just email me, right? If you haven't heard from me, be like, hey, Professor Nightingale, what's the deal with my grade for the semester? What points am I missing? And I will get back to you, okay? So we are in the final moments of this class, and I am, as I said in my last email announcement, I am like married to my computer at this moment. So if you email me and you have a question, I should be able to get back to you pretty quickly. We just need to make sure that everything is real tight over this next week, so that we can all be, as successful as we want to be. right? We're looking for success, and that's my job, is to help you be successful. Okay, so yeah, the final exam, if you're in my hybrid class, I call it the Unit 3 exam. If you're in my Wednesday class, I call it the final exam. It's the same thing. There are, depending on which section you're in, between 38 and 42 questions or 44 questions, multiple choice, short answer, some fill in the blank stuff. It shouldn't be a big surprise to you what's on this exam. So I want to encourage you, thinking about, you have a week before the final exam is due, go back into the notes. All of the notes for the entire semester are on Blackboard for you, right? All of the lecture notes. Use those, print those out if you have a printer. Or, you know what, even better, don't print them out, but write them out by hand. The absolute best way to study and remember everything is to write things out by hand. Science has shown this multiple times over, that when you type things, you don't remember them as much as when you write them out. So write out your notes, annotate them, go back in, write the review questions and answer those. When you write things out and when you do it repeatedly, you are more likely to keep that information in your brain than if you just look at notes on a screen and think, well, I can remember that come test time. It's not going to stick in your brain. You have to do that mechanical sort of motion of writing out notes and writing out your own answers, okay? So yeah, there's a study guide also in the Unit 3 course content folder. Scroll down to the bottom of the page. You'll see that study guide. It has all of the key terms and review questions from the entirety of Unit 3. Think about those concepts as they relate to each other. So sometimes I see students who study so hard, but they will define each keyword and think of it as just a standalone thing. So they go, all right, maybe the keywords are patrilocal. They say, okay, after marriage, a couple lives with the father side of the family, patrilocal. And then they see matrilocal, and it's like the page is reset. Matrilocal means after marriage, a couple lives with the mother's family. And then they see patrilineal, complete reset. After marriage, or when a child is born, the family is defined by the male bloodline. And then matrilineal. All right, a child's bloodline is defined by its mother's lineage or whatever. Think about how all of those things go together, right? Most of those concepts are related in some sort of way and they fit together. So think about concepts rather than just specific definitions, because the exam is not just about definitions, about how do we take all of these ideas and work them together to understand something about human societies, okay? All right, I see questions come in. Professor, I have a question. Is the study review, the study guide up to date? It is up to date, okay? And I can double check this again, but I just uploaded the Unit 3 / final exam study guide a couple days ago to make sure that everything you needed was on there. So yes, the study guide is up to date, okay? All right, let me get some water. All right. So let's see. I've talked about the 23rd is the big day that we're all aiming for. And also, you obviously turn stuff in before the 23rd. The 23rd is the last day that I can accept stuff for credit, but please send me stuff before the 23rd because it means if there's some sort of issue, then I have more lead time to respond to it. So you don't have to wait until the 23rd. Starting tomorrow morning, you can take the last exam of the semester and you just have this open window from tomorrow morning through the 23rd, which is next Saturday. So whenever works for you, that's when I need you to get that stuff in, okay? All right, let's talk about religion. Religion, magic, and superstition. And this is the material that was assigned to you all this last week. I uploaded, it was actually sort of the first part of this lecture, There were already the last two parts that were on Blackboard, but I needed to do the first part. We weren't able to be together in person. I had to record the first part. And so I want to go over some of the points of the religion, magic, superstition lecture. However, any questions that you have as we go along, drop them in the chat field here, and I will address them as soon as they come up, okay? All right, so thinking about religion from an anthropological perspective, as anthropologists, we want to understand, what does it mean to live in a society of other humans? And religion is obviously a very big part of that. Even if individuals don't have a personal connection to religion, religion is not something that we can separate ourselves from, right? Religion is in every single part of our lives. It infuses itself, or it has been infused into every aspect of human culture. So, the political battles that have been fought in the United States over the last 400 years, a lot of that has to do with religion. The international wars that have been fought over the last 2,000 years, a lot of that has to do with religion. Religion informs our political values, our ideas about health, like health standards or health rights or reproductive rights. Religion influences so much of our world, even if we, as individuals, are not religious or super religious. So religion is this thing that has existed within human societies for the entire time that we've had human history. As long as humans have been writing things down, there has been religion. It is a human universal. Every human society has religion. And even those most atheistic societies, like communities where religion doesn't figure as largely into their lives, like the Scandinavian countries where a lot of people report being atheist or agnostic, they still have a religious history, right? Those are still the Vikings, and they've got the gods like Thor and Odin, and there's still this religious history that has helped shape their apologists. We think of religion as the study, or it's the study of the supernatural. And the supernatural can take a lot of forms. It can be a God that watches over all of us and sees everything that we do and tells us what's good and what's bad. But the supernatural is also just like anything that exists outside of the physical, observable world that we exist in. So my whiteboard marker, this is part of the natural, physical, observable world. I can hold this. I can, it makes a noise if I tap it on my computer, and I can cut it apart and see its components. I can take the ink and I can look at its chemical composition in a laboratory. The supernatural, I can't hold. I can't smell it. I can't taste it. I can't see it. I can't take it into a laboratory and dissect it to find its components. The supernatural is anything outside of the physical, observable world. Depending on what community we're talking about, the supernatural is sometimes very intimately connected to people's lives. Some people say that whatever the supernatural thing is that they believe in, it's like it's there with them every day. It walks beside them. It's inside of them. And for others, the supernatural is like, it's that thing over there. Like, I don't bother it. It doesn't bother me, but I know it's there. But like, we're cool, right? So there's a different connection between the natural world and the supernatural world, depending on what religion and what culture we're looking at. And the study of religion from an anthropological perspective is as much about what people believe as how they believe it. So the relationship between the people who believe things and the thing that they believe that's actually the most important part, because anthropology is about humans, right? Anthropology isn't the study of gods. Anthropology is the study of humans. So it's like, if I have this culture of people that I'm studying and they have a belief in X, Y, or Z gods, like, okay, cool. But I want to know how you as humans interact with those gods. It's the human part of it that interests me. The other, the sort of extension of that is also that as anthropologists, we will generally take a stance of saying, like, whatever the religion is of the group I'm studying, I'm just going to go ahead and say, cool, you're right. That's true. Whatever you believe to be true, that's true. Because does it really matter if a culture's religion is true? No, and we can't prove it any, like, either way. So our job as anthropologists is we definitely want to not be ethnocentric. We don't want to walk into someone else's community or someone else's religious group and say, that's what you believe? Well, that's ridiculous. Like, of course the earth doesn't sit on the back of a turtle, or of course the earth isn't at the base of a giant tree. That's ridiculous. I can show you photos from space and I'll show you that your religion is wrong. That would be extremely, extremely ethnocentric. Rather, we want to look at other people's religions and we can just say, like, cool, if that's what you believe, then that's what's true, because it doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is if people believe that it's true. If people believe it's true, that's what makes the meaning, right? It's people's belief in these concepts. And it's the same with all of these other concepts we've talked about, even something like race, right? Race isn't biologically real, but people believe it's real. So that's why we have to understand why people believe it's real and what the ramifications are of that. Religion, whether this God or this spirit or that soul, whether it's real or not, it doesn't matter. It matters what people believe to be true, and then we understand how they interact with that. Okay, so let's start hitting some of these key words that might appear if you were the kind of person who is taking a final exam in this class. So the first, we're talking about religious communities. So religion happens when people get together, right? And we can say that individuals have religion, but it has to happen in groups. You can't really have a religion of one person. A religion of one person is just like that weird guy standing on the street with a cardboard sign. It's like, okay, you have to have a community. But something really special happens when people do religion in communities, when people come together to worship. So the first thing is this increased feeling of solidarity. When people come together and worship together, they build a feeling of unity and you could say brotherhood, feeling of like, that's my family, and I know that because I see them every week and we're side by side and we all believe the same thing. So like, we've got this real strong connection between us. That's called communitas. Communitas, it looks a lot like the word community because it has a similar root, a similar meaning. It's the feeling of solidarity that is developed when groups of people do their religion together. Another thing that comes when people do their religion at the same time or in the same place is this concept called effervescence. Effervescence is the emotional high that people get when they do their religion together. It's, and I said this in the review video, but effervescence is, if you think about like Alka-Seltzer tabs or Efferdent, right? Like the denture cleaner. It's called Efferdent for a reason, because you drop these tablets into a glass of water, and what do? They bubble, right? They bubble and they fizz, and that's what effervescence is. It's a fizzing and a bubbling and a frothing over. Effervescence in a religious sense is the emotional bubbling up and frothing over that people get when they worship together. And so effervescence can mean singing or dancing or clapping or, speaking in tongues or being touched by the Holy Ghost. There are all different ways, depending on your religious community, that effervescence can happen. But it's when people get worked up during their religious experience. Some communities are more effervescent than others, but when you have a lot of effervescence, it also helps build that sense of communitas. The more, and you might say that, like, this is maybe a psychological way of thinking about it, but the more effervescent people get, it's almost like increased vulnerability. And so the fact that you're able to be vulnerable around these people means that you're more intimately tied with them. And so that builds the concept of communitas. Okay, so every religious community has communitas. Effervescence is variable, but they all go towards building this feeling of unity. And this is where religion has its strength. Religion brings people together around unifying ideas. And religion also drives people apart. We can see that in our own recent history in the United States. Religion is a divisive issue where people have come to believe that that person over there, because of their religious belief, they have a completely different way of seeing the world, and therefore, they're against me in some sort of way. If we took the time to look at all of these different religions, we'd probably find that they're more compatible than not. But the point remains that religion unites people and it also divides people. And I see a couple of people coming in online. It is wonderful to see you. I'm glad, very, very glad you're here. Good to see you. Okay, so another part of looking at religion is trying to understand, where does religion come from? We know that all human societies in the world today have religious beliefs, or at least a religious history. So at what point in the human past did humans come to believe in some sort of supernatural power? It's a really hard question to answer, because humans, no, I don't want to say humans. It's a hard question to answer. When did we get religion? Because religion is about faith. It's about ideas. And ideas and beliefs don't fossilize very well, right? We asked this question about, when did language begin in humans? Language doesn't fossilize well. Words don't fossilize. And so in the same way, religion doesn't necessarily fossilize. And we have to imagine that people believed things before they wrote them down. The earliest written records are only like 8,000 years old. But it's reasonable to expect that humans, Homo sapiens, we've been in our same physical and neurological form for many, many years now. It's reasonable to expect that religious belief is something that developed far earlier than the first time anyone wrote anything down. So how do we identify religion in the past? One way that we might identify religion in the past is by looking at art, because we know that art and religion are very intimately intertwined in a lot of the major religions of the modern world. So things like cave paintings. All throughout Southwestern Europe, there are cave paintings that depict these really beautiful, like beautifully painted animals like buffalo, or I should say bison. Buffalo is American. Bison, or some like the lions. Every once in a while, there's a human figure, but these really beautiful cave paintings. And some anthropologists and archaeologists have said this is early religion. It's kind of like walking into, a Catholic church or a mosque, and you see images on the wall that depict important stories in that religion's history. So that might be true, but it doesn't have to be true, right? Like, people paint on walls for all sorts of reasons. People paint on walls, yes, to depict important stories in their own mythology and their own history, but also just to be like, I saw this really rad bison today. I'm gonna paint it on this wall because I want everyone to know about this super cool bison that I saw today, and maybe I killed it today. People also paint on walls just to be like, I want everyone to know I was here. Right? I don't want anyone walking through this cave without knowing that Steve the caveman was here, or whatever the thing is. So do these cave paintings have to mean religion? No. Could they? Sure, but they don't have to. And the same goes for other types of art that goes back tens of thousands of years. There are these little examples of figurines from, it's called the Upper Paleolithic or the Epi-Paleolithic in Europe. And they're these female figurines. And some people will say, oh, well, these represent like female, like Earth Mother goddess figurines. It shows that people 30,000 years ago worshipped the life-giving qualities of women because women can create life out of nowhere. And it's kind of magical, right? It might mean that, but it doesn't have to. We can find all sorts of examples in the modern world of female figures being represented that are exaggerated in their sort of like reproductive organs that have absolutely nothing to do with women being worshipped, right? Barbie dolls are these hyper exaggerated female figurines, really big breasts, really tiny waists, long legs with very tiny feet. It's like this example of an unattainable female form, but that doesn't mean that starting in the 1950s, all Americans worshipped women for their life-giving abilities, right? So stylization and you know what I mean, fetishization of the female form doesn't necessarily equal religious worship. All of this is to say, art is a good place to look for religion because we know of that connection, but it's not necessarily always true. It's not 100% that art and religion are going to be intertwined. So, okay, I see Cassandra just said, it's like prehistoric shitposting. Didn't the ruins in Pompeii have graffiti you would find in modern day modern day high school bathrooms? You're entirely right, Cassandra. And there have been numerous instances of graffiti from like old prehistoric and historic and classical sites. And a lot of them are like, we like to think about people who lived 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, especially like in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, as having been like, you know, these smart people and the birth of democracy and whatever. A lot of times these people carved stuff into walls that was mostly like dick jokes and fart jokes and like your mom is a whore jokes. They were just the same as humans today, in that they made fun of each other. They drew things that you know, they thought they were funny. It doesn't have to mean it's religion. It's just from our lens, from our perspective as anthropologists and archaeologists, when we see these things, and it's like, well, this is the thing that was saved. This is the thing that has remained over all this time. It must be so important. It must mean ritual and it must mean religion. But we need to be cognizant that those connections aren't always, they don't have to be 100%. And I see a comment, the concept can better be explained from ethno-archaeological perspective. Sure, yeah. Ethno-archaeology is a very important field, like a subfield or a certain way of doing archaeology where we use modern day societies to better understand the past. So we study groups of humans today and we understand how they respond to their particular scenarios or what do I want to say? We learn how they respond to the situations that they're in, and then we try to understand how that could inform us about how people lived in the past. So you're absolutely right. Ethnoarchaeology is a very important and robust field of study. If you're in one of my classes, don't worry, you're not going to be tested on ethnoarchaeology, but it's a way that we can use modern cultures to understand cultures of the past. Okay, so we're talking about art as a way to understand human societies, and we also might use burials to understand religion in human societies, because typically if we find a burial that has some sort of grave goods, meaning that people put things into a grave with a person, that might indicate some sort of belief in what happens after the person has died. Now, we can't tell what the person believed, but we can know that they believed something. So we might not be able to construct the beliefs themselves, but we can start to understand the fact that people were differentiating between the natural and the supernatural realm. Okay, so I see a comment has also just come in. Please throw some light on differences between magic, religion, and science. Tell you what, I'm going to keep going because maybe we'll kind of incorporate this as we go along. Okay, so we've talked about how anthropologists might approach using archaeological evidence, how we might approach the topic of where did religion first start. To go in kind of a different trajectory, an anthropologist who lived 100 years ago, a little bit more, Edward Tylor, he did this sort of thought experiment where he basically tried to imagine what the earliest religions would have looked like. So he recognized that humans are very good at picking up on patterns. We're very good at explaining things that we see in the natural world, even if we don't know why they happen, right? So like 50,000 years ago, humans could see that the sun always comes up over there and always goes down over there. Maybe they don't know why, but they can see this is a thing that happens every day. I'm not going to be surprised next Tuesday when the sun comes up over there for some reason, right? There's a pattern to it. But he also suggested that one of the things that would have been very difficult for our ancestors to understand, especially without, modern science and modern medicine, would have been dreams, because dreams are super weird, right? We all in 2020, we're smart people. Humans are as smart as we've ever been. We have more technology than has ever existed before. We know more about the human body than we've ever known before. And still, I guarantee you, a lot of us are like, dreams are pretty weird. Maybe they predict the future. Maybe they're telling me what to do with my life. Dreams are super weird. So Edward Tylor said that in the past, with our ancestors, the inability to explain dreams just through observation might have led to the earliest form of religion. So he hypothesized that early humans, like our early human ancestors, they were dreaming, and we know lots of things dream. Like my dog dreams all the time. He falls asleep for 30 seconds, he's already dreaming. So we know that dreams are commonplace things. So Edward Tylor speculated that our earlier human ancestors came to believe that dreams represented a sort of separate life apart from the physical body, and that dreams showed that each human was consisting of two parts. We've got the physical body, but then we've got something inside of our physical body that when we go to sleep, it can come out of our body, and it kind of like goes on its own little adventures throughout the evening. And then when the night's over, that little separate inside part of ourselves that has climbed out, it can climb back inside, and that's when we wake up. So every human has two parts, the physical body and then some inner part. It's still us, but it's not the physical self. If this sounds familiar, it's because that's how we typically think of this thing called a soul. So Edward Tylor suggested that dreams and people trying to explain what dreams are led to the belief in souls, that every human has a physical body and also something inside of us that is outside of our physical body, and that especially when we die, meaning that our souls climb out of our body and then they don't ever come back, that our souls still exist even when our physical body has ended. This belief in the existence of souls is called animism. Okay, so animism, A-N-I-M-I-S-M. It comes from the Latin word anima, which means soul. So animism in its truest sense just means the belief in souls and spirits. And people came to believe that not only do you have a soul and I have a soul and that person over there has a soul, but maybe there are souls that exist within other animals or rivers or mountains or whatever. So animism is just the belief in spirits and souls. Importantly, in animism, there is not a belief in some God, some all-powerful deity that oversees the world. It's just about spirits and souls. We still see animism in some historic societies, so people who have lived within the last 100 years or so. The people that we see who have animistic religions are typically hunter-gatherers or foragers. And so I want to make this association very clear. Animism is the simplest type of religion, and forager groups are the simplest type of human society. We tend to see that the more complex the human society we're talking about, the more complex religion becomes. And this, I don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers, but religion is very often tied to the social and political systems in which it resides. So as societies get more complex, as political systems emerge and get more complex, religions also get more complex. So you move from animism to polytheism, which is a belief in a single all-powerful God. Nope, said that entirely wrong. Polytheism is a belief in multiple gods. My apologies. Polytheism is a belief in multiple gods, and they're not all powerful, and sometimes they're kind of bitchy to each other. Like they hold grudges and they don't like each other, and they take out their vendettas on humans. And then as you get larger and larger societies, you're more likely to see the monotheistic religions, the single all-powerful gods. Okay, and monotheism also supports a lot of modern human political systems. So these things are intimately tied together. All right, let's see. What do I want to say? Let me make sure that I'm catching up on these comments. Can you talk about? Okay. So I see a comment asking a little bit more about Natufian burial sites, and tell you what, I'm going to save that for just a little bit from now when we talk about cultivation, because I think that will come in at that point. Is there any better explication other than given Fraser? No, not for me. As an archaeologist, I'm sticking with some pretty rudimentary, like culture, historical understandings of religion, because again, this is an introduction to anthropology class, and so it's okay for us to take these models as models, and then we understand that human societies diverge and flourish from there. We obviously know that humans never fit into categories that we can slot everyone else who's just like them into. Humans are incredibly diverse. And so we use frameworks to understand how different societies might develop in one way or another. And I'm not saying for better or for worse, just how societies expand and evolve their belief systems. And especially when it comes to religion, this is often tied to political systems, social systems, and also social complexity. So I'm not going to expand beyond that point, but your question is well taken, Ravi Teja. Okay. All right. So thinking about religion and the belief in the supernatural, in a lot of religions, there is this sort of idea, and even for atheists and agnostics or people who are a-religious, there's this idea that the supernatural kind of just exists in the world. It's like this, it's like energy, like electricity in the air, right? And so all of us, we're like Nikola Tesla, where we can just grab electricity out of the air and we can use it for our own purposes. So for many people, the supernatural is this electricity in the air that we can make work for our benefit. And the way that we do this is through things like magic. Magic could be defined from an anthropological perspective as any sort of ritual or spell or prayer that a person conducts in order to make make the world work for them, right? So it could be, for some people, magic is like, if I say, "Dear God, please give me a pony," because I really want a pony. "Dear God, please give me a pony." That's magic, because I'm trying to use my actions to influence what will happen in the world. Or magic could be, and I use this example in the video that I put out a couple days ago. Magic could be, I move into a new apartment, and so I get a sage smudge, and I walk around the house and I go, oh, I wave my sage smudge all around. That's me trying to get rid of negative energy in my household. That's magic, because I'm doing a particular action to create a certain result. Another specific type of magic would be imitative magic, when I do like a miniaturized version of something to create a result. So voodoo dolls are a good example of this. If I have a voodoo doll that I'm poking this little effigy and that's supposed to cause harm to someone else. So magic happens in lots of ways, but magic can also be, if I spill salt on the table, and I know this is not everyone's cultural tradition, but for me, if you spill salt, that's bad luck, because salt used to be this very expensive resource. And so to spill it would be like inviting evil spirits into your life, because you're being wasteful with this very expensive thing. So in my cultural tradition, when you spill salt, you're supposed to take a pinch of it and throw it over your left shoulder. And that's supposed to keep away the evil spirits, the demons, right? So when anyone spills salt around me, I pick some up and I throw it over my left shoulder. That's magic, because I'm doing an action to keep to make the world the way that I want it to be. Okay, let's see, what's the last part I want to talk about? I guess I just want to finish up talking about religion by talking about the concepts of social control and also social change. Religion is such a powerful force in our world. And again, whether we believe in it or not, we can't deny the fact that religion has a hold on human society. For people who are religious, religion also tends to exert a great influence on how people live and how they act and the things that they do in their life. So we can say that dependent on a person's religious belief system, that sort of sets up limits to their own behavior, just like culture, right? Culture says, here's what you're allowed to do. And then religion says, okay, but here's what you're allowed to do within that. We see that people put themselves within these smaller religious bubbles. We can see why those smaller religious bubbles become more important when we understand that people recognize the usefulness of religion, right? So every religion has rules. Every religion says, do this, don't do that, do this other thing, and especially don't do that. When we follow the rules of our religion, and when things go well for us, we go, oh, well, it's no wonder that things are good for me. It's because I followed the rules of my religion. So therefore, my religious rules must be good rules, because they're keeping me safe, they're keeping me healthy, they're keeping me happy. So if these religious rules are working for me, then those religious rules must also be good. And I should also follow those religious rules so that I can continue being happy. So the more that we see religion work for us, the more it works for us, and the more strongly we believe, right? And in one of the videos, I talked about how a lot of the things that we do, especially when it comes to like magic, or prayer, however you sort of conceive it in your life, when we do these prayers or magics and the thing that we want comes true, we say to ourselves, it worked. It worked. And so that means that when I do this thing, it will happen. That means that my belief system is true. When it doesn't work, we say, I must not have done it right. I must have messed up the spell somehow. I didn't pray hard enough, right? So we give a lot of credit to when things confirm our beliefs, and we tend to dismiss when things don't support our belief system. So the same is true with how religion acts to sort of constrain our particular behaviors. So now we extend this and think about what happens when we break the rules of our society. If we're talking about our secular society, our non-religious society, when you break the rules, it's called a crime, right? So if I stab someone on the street, that's a crime. I'm not supposed to stab someone. Or if I park in a school bus zone, that's also a crime. I'm not supposed to park there. There are rules, and I broke the rules. So in secular society, for crimes, the punishment is jail time or fines, or, you know, if you do something real bad, like maybe you might be executed. But for the most of us, when we commit crimes, you know, it's fines or jail time. In a religious setting, when you break a rule, it's not called a crime, it's called a sin, right? And what are the consequences for a sin? Yeah, I mean, maybe you have to say a couple Hail Marys, or, you know, do some sort of penance. But the real sin, the real consequence for a sin is that your soul could be in danger. And right, the soul is this thing that exists beyond our body. So it's like, even after my body is gone, my soul will still exist, and it can continue to be punished. The same way I don't want my body to be in prison for the next 60 years, I definitely don't want my soul to be in prison for the next forever years. So the consequences for breaking the religious rules of your society can be super, super extreme. What this can lead to is what's called a leveling mechanism. Religion has a leveling mechanism where it says the best way to succeed in your society is to make sure that basically no one thinks you're breaking the rules. Don't let anyone think that you are breaking those religious rules and committing a sin. But the big point here is that it's honestly a little bit less about not committing the sin, and it's more about don't let anyone think you're committing a sin, okay? It's a lot more about the fear that's instilled into people to get them to conform according to certain guidelines about how you're supposed to live. So the best example of this would be the Salem witch trials, which took place in the 1690s in the United States and Massachusetts. In the Salem witch trials, there were like 30-something women and men who were executed because they were accused of being witches. How do you accuse someone of being a witch, or how do you get found guilty as being a witch? For most of these people, they were just like, I don't know, maybe a little bit weird. Someone found them tra-la-laing in the forest. Or the other way this happened was, let's say I'm walking down the street and I see someone and she's giving me kind of a stanky look. I'm going to go to the pastor and be like, you see, you know, Goody Johnson over here? She was giving me a stanky look, and then I stubbed my toe. I think she's a witch. Then she gets executed. Or if she thinks that I'm about to go to the pastor to tell on her for giving me a stank look when I stub my toe, she's got to get there before me and say, you know, Goody Nightingale, I saw her walking down the street, and her face kind of looked like a goat for a second. I think she's a witch. So the best way to make sure that no one accuses you of being a witch is to accuse other people of being a witch first. And this still exists in our modern world in 2020. We still do this thing of pointing fingers at other people so that they won't point fingers back at us. Because for most humans, the threat of our souls burning in hell, it's so abstract. But the threat of being ostracized from our religious communities is so extreme. It's super, super harsh. It's being kicked out of our deepest and most intimate families. And so the only way to not be kicked out of our communities is to everyone act the same way. That's what we mean when we say religion is a leveling mechanism. It means everyone act the same. Don't be different, because being different is going to get people looking at you like you're doing something wrong. So in this, we see how religion, this has nothing to do with the supernatural. Actually, it's entirely to do with how people look at each other. So religion is as much about the humans involved with it as it is about whatever supernatural deity that people believe in. Okay. Oh, I've talked for so long about religion. I should have kept this this short. Let me just make sure that I'm not human culture to diversity explained. Okay. Wet my whistle. Let's see. The last thing that I want to talk about with religion is how some religions support social change and some don't. So we know that there are religious populations in our world today that we call fundamentalists. These are people who are kind of like, our religion was right 2,000 years ago. Whatever the rules that were written down 2,000 years ago, they still work for us today, right? Now, I don't want to, get too controversial. Personally, I think that any sort of rules were written down 2,000 years ago, things need to change with the times. Cultures evolve, cultures adapt, and I think religious rules should probably adapt along with those social systems. But religious communities who are fundamentalists would say, no, whatever rules were written down then still work for us now. But there are also religious communities that we call revitalization movements. And the term revitalization movement is, it can also be applied to most new religions. A revitalization movement is a religious movement that attempts to change society through religious belief. It's when people get together around some central figure and they go, hey, we've got a new way of thinking about the world. Like the world that we're in right now, it sucks, it's screwed up. But get with this, we can fix it. We can fix what's wrong with the world. That's a revitalization movement. Christianity is a revitalization movement. Most religions, when they started, were revitalization movements because it was people going, guys, I'm pretty sure this sucks right now. Let's change it. And the way that you sort of marshal support for that is often around a religious figure. Cargo cults, my favorite, cargo cults are another example of a revitalization movement. And I'm not going to talk too much about it now because I've put videos up. There's a whole video about cargo cults. But essentially, cargo cults are a religious movement in the South Pacific where these native islanders have seen for hundreds of years how white people have a lot of wealth and political status and they have very little. And so they have generated and developed this religion that attempts to basically get back the economic and political bounty that they believe they had in the past. They're attempting to take it back from white people who they believe stole it from them years ago. And so this whole religion has built up where islanders are like, white people stole all of our wealth generations ago, and now we have to practice our religion, and then we're going to get it back. And if you watch the video that I've linked on Blackboard, there's a lot of it that seems like kind of ridiculous. Like, how are you're gonna march around in blue jeans with bamboo guns, and you're gonna make planes out of reeds and grasses? That's not gonna bring some sort of savior. But what we see is that religion, and this religion, is specifically addressing the question of economic injustice and economic inequality. That's how religions form. Religions don't form when everything's great and people are like, we're all 100% happy. We're cool. Everyone's got exactly what they need. No one's got any complaints. We're just chilling and everyone's super satisfied. Religions start when at least some people in a society are not represented, not happy, not satisfied, not getting their representation, whatever it is. Religions start out of agitation, and it attempts to use the supernatural to solve the problems of the social world. Okay. Let me see. Let me make sure I'm not... Facts. Some bad things keep happening. Yeah, so just someone commented here, if bad things keep happening when someone's visiting us, they'll be branded as witches. That's absolutely right. Like, and the concept of witches also changes culture to culture. Like, I grew up in a Christian culture where witches didn't exist. Magic doesn't exist in the Christian culture that I grew up in. And so that was also the reason why, like, I wasn't allowed to pray for a pony. I couldn't say, "Dear God, please bring me a pony," because that would be trying to use magic, and magic didn't exist. So that was the particular brand of Christianity that I grew up with. But witchcraft, witches, magic, they do exist in a lot of types of Christianity. But often Christianity, the witchcraft and magic is considered to be an evil thing. So it's like those types of Christianity will say, we know that witchcraft exists, we just think it's evil, which is a big difference from we don't even believe that witchcraft exists. And then you've got the other types of Christianity that say, yeah, magic exists, witches exist, and it works right in time with our version of Christianity. So the concept of witches and magic also varies depending on what culture and what religious tradition we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, in terms of branding someone a witch, like, it really could be as simple as a woman walks by a man. Maybe there are so many stories like this. Maybe the guy is like, hey, hey girl, what's going on with you? If she gives him a sideways glance and he twists his ankle, he's like, she cursed me. She's a witch, right? No attention paid to the fact that he's the one being the creep in the first place. It's her not obeying the social rules of the time, which is to say that a woman is never supposed to, sort of stand up for herself. She's the one disobeying the social rules. Ergo, she's a witch. Oh, witchcraft, man. It's a fascinating subject because it entirely depends on the social and religious rules about who's a witch and whether or not it's good or bad. Okay, what am I saying? So revitalization movements, yeah, they occur when people are basically trying to change society. If you are a student in my class, look on Blackboard for that video about cargo cults. If you are not a student in my class, just Google cargo cults, because it's an incredibly interesting religious phenomenon that started developing about 200 years ago, and really in the last 80 years has become this very strong phenomenon. And they're just fascinating groups of people. Okay, so I had said to Cassandra a little while ago that I was going to talk about Natufian burials. I had also said in my emails to everyone that I was going to talk about cultivation. I'll tell you what, it's already 8:05 because I've had so much fun talking about religion, but I'm actually going to hold off on cultivation. I'm doing another review video on Sunday at 2 p.m., so I'll talk about cultivation more then. But Cassandra, since you asked specifically about Natufian burial sites, yeah, what we see, it works perfectly in here. As I mentioned before, burials can be indications not necessarily of what people believed in terms of religion or the supernatural, but at least it can tell us that people believed something, right? Because if you don't believe anything, if you believe that when a person dies, that's it. There's not a need to do something more extravagant with their grave. In today's world, there are a lot of people who say, when the body dies, then that's it, and it's done, and there's nothing that happens afterwards. But there's also this sort of like cultural idea about, well, we bury our dead and we put up gravestones because that's the way that we honor the person that has come before. So there's culture tied into that as well. And then there are some people who are religious who are like, yeah, but if, the body's dead, the soul is gone, then it doesn't matter what I put the body into because it's the soul that's important and it's already gone. So there's a lot of variation around there. When we look at Natufian graves, it's a perfect example of We can't say what they thought, but we know they thought something. The Natufians were a group of hunter-gatherers, and the name Natufian is something that archaeologists have given to this culture. We don't know what they called themselves because they all went extinct thousands of years ago. Like, they disappeared from their towns and villages thousands of years ago. It's just archaeologists have found those towns and villages, and we've given them that name, Natufians. The Natufians were hunter-gatherers or foragers, meaning they got all of their food resources from the wild. They were not planting domesticated crops. They weren't farmers. They weren't raising domesticated animals, really. They were getting all of they needed from the natural world. And they settled in a particular part of the Middle East called the Hilly Flanks. This is where there were a lot of food resources that were naturally available to them. The Natufians were some of the first hunter-gatherers to settle down or become sedentary, meaning living a settled life in villages. Sedentary is the opposite of nomadic. And so as the Natufians built these villages and they were collecting these wild plants like wheat and barley, and then hunting wild animals like gazelle, they were building these permanent towns, and also then they were burying their dead. And every culture has its own way of burying their dead. The Natufians, they had their own practices that sort of varied from town to town or village to village. So in some towns, the Natufians would, when someone in their family died, they would dig a hole in their kitchen floor. And again, this is like the first group of people to ever have a kitchen, right? But in their little homes of sort of like adobe, stucco, mud brick homes and plaster floors, they would dig up the plaster floor and they would put that person under the kitchen floor, bent up in a fetal position. And then after a couple of years, they would come back, they would dig a hole around where the head of that person was. They would pull out the person's skull and they would replace it with a fox skull. And then they would take the person's skull, they would cover it in plaster and put like shells in the eyes, and then it would like go up on the shelf. So they were keeping their loved ones close to them, very literally close to them, by having them on the shelf or on the table in their immediate living space. But also it's interesting because they're like, well, you can't have a body without a head. All right, put a fox head in there. There's something going on and there's something symbolic happening there that we can't know because they didn't write down why they did this, but we know that they did it for a reason, right? In other Natufian towns, they didn't replace fox heads with regular heads, but when a person was buried, they'd be crunched up in their little fetal position graves, and then between the person's hands would be a little puppy. So every time someone would die, they'd bury a little puppy with them. Now, maybe this is a guardian into the afterlife. Maybe it's just a companion. Maybe it's a snack. We don't know. Those are very different interpretations. But for whatever reason, we know that these people intentionally buried a puppy with someone when that person died. It's not like the puppy died naturally and they're like, oh, I'll just put them together. This was an intentional thing. And the other example that I included in the video is the example from Boker Taktit, where there's that supposed shaman burial. You have an individual who was often assumed to be a man, but some people think it actually might be a woman, buried in this dugout hole. And with the individual who's, again, buried on their side in sort of fetal position, there are all of these different animal parts. There's like the jawbone of a bear. There's some sort of lion bone in there. There's the wing of an eagle. There's 40 turtles and a human foot, an extra human foot, right? So not that person's foot, another person's foot in that person's grave. What does this mean? We don't know. We don't know what it means because no one wrote down what it means, but we know it means something. It has to mean something. No one dies and ends up in a hole with an eagle wing, a bear jaw, 40 turtles, and a foot. That just doesn't happen. So it must have been put there intentionally. We can't know why, but what we can know is that probably this person had high status in their society. So burials will often tell us about a person's status within their community, because if a person gets put into a grave with a lot of objects that have value, as soon as you put a valuable thing into a grave, it means no one else can use it, right? If I go and I put $10,000 in someone's coffin, that $10,000 could go a long way out here, but as soon as I put it into someone's coffin, it's out of circulation. It means no one gets to use it. It means that person must have been important enough that they're worth it to not have $10,000 in circulation. So in the same way, when a lot of things are put into a grave with a person in the past, it tells us something about their relative value in that community. So in that way, religion not only tells us that people believed in something, even if we don't know what it is, but it also tells us that they probably had some sort of stratification in their society. This is the cool thing about Natufian burials, because it's with the Natufians, even though they're still hunter-gatherers, that we start to see a stratification in society, a move away from egalitarianism. As people settle down in villages, they start to accumulate stuff. As people start to accumulate stuff, the people with more stuff are seen as being, for whatever reason, better. They're wealthy. They have, having more stuff means you're good and you have more value. And we do the same thing in our society. The people with more stuff, we go, yeah, well, I mean, of course they have more stuff. It's because they're super cool. So all of these systems tie together. Oh my goodness, how I wish we could have spent the semester talking about all of these systems together in class. Listen, my friends, I have talked for so long. So I'll tell you what, I said I was going to talk about cultivation tonight, but I've talked for so long about religion. I'm going to pause on cultivation. On Sunday, I'm going to do another one of these review sessions. And I sent out an email a little while ago to every one of my classes. I've got a number of reviews and office hour sessions over the next week leading into this final exam period. So on Sunday, I'm going to go over cultivation again. And I'll talk about the 3 different types of cultivation: horticulture, agriculture, pastoralism. I'll talk about the characteristics of each. I'll talk about how horticulture first developed. And then we'll just sort of take it from there. But if you are one of my students and you're still hanging in through all of this, thank you so much for being here. You have all of the resources that I think you need on Blackboard, but please email me if you have any questions. And then with all of these review sessions and online office hours over the next week, come in with questions, right? If there's something you don't understand or something that's like not quite making sense to you, let me know and I'll go through it again. Everyone's been kind of on their own for the last 2 months, so it would make sense that not every explanation that I give in my lecture videos makes sense to everyone. So let me know what you have questions about. I'll go over it again, and I'll do it 19 million times until we're all comfortable, okay? So I'm gonna leave it there for now. Thank you, everyone who has been watching this throughout. Thank you to everyone who comes along behind and watches this. And I really hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful Friday evening and weekend. If you're in New York, enjoy the weather because it was beautiful outside earlier. And I don't know, I don't have an answer about Neolithic cultures and cannibalism in the elite classes, but maybe I'll think about that and I'll come back to that next time. Okay, take care, everyone. Have a good night. You're all beautiful and wonderful, and I'll see you later. Bye.